everyone. I feel like you five have become like my loyal following. I see your names in lots of my webinars, which makes me so happy. So I'm so happy to see you again. Some of you I just saw this morning, so woohoo. And yes, Cynthia reminded us that it is payday, which makes it a very happy day. I didn't even know that. So you just made my day all the better. So thank you for that. If you are joining us this afternoon, we are going to talk more about Google Forms. So in part one, we got to those basic question types and talked about adding some of those other features like pictures and video, but there were some more advanced question types that we didn't have time to dive into. We also didn't have a chance to look at the data after students have taken it. So we're going to look at that today. I should be on my objective slides as I'm saying these things. And then I do also want to try to squeeze in time to talk about branching and response validation. Those are some of the extra features that we have in our question types themselves. And then if we happen to speed through all of that, which I don't think is going to happen, but if we do, at the very end, we'll squeeze in a little discussion about some of the add-ons that you could use with Google Forms. Again, I am not super optimistic that we'll get there though. So we'll see. I don't know. All right, so looking at my names here, I obviously don't need to go over our Zoom features, so we're just gonna jump right in. I am gonna start with a brand new, fresh Google form today, but I'm gonna pull in some of the regular question types so that we have that data for when we look at responses. So kind of bear with me for a second. I'm gonna go to my drive and I'm gonna create a brand new, fresh Google form to work with. 1 second. Okay, and I'm just going to call this my webinar sample form for today. And then just to get some extra question types in here, I'm just going to pull in import some questions from another form. So we have examples of things like multiple choice and things like that. So I don't even know. That's not mine. I won't use that one. See, this is the problem with being part of so many different Google Classrooms is that I have all of your quizzes as well. So if I'm a teacher in your Google Classroom, I'm seeing your quizzes in addition to mine. So I don't know if this one might do it. Let's try. All right, so I'll pull in our identifiers. And then this looks like it's a fill in the blank. So we're going to pull in these. Let's see what we got here. So we have a few ungraded questions. And then we have a multiple choice. And then we only have 3 multiple choices. So we're going to need to pull in some other questions here in addition to that. So I'm just going to pull another quiz. Let's see what we got here. This is a fun game. Multiple choice. Here's a short answer we'll pull. All right, and I might just create a random one real quick. Which of the following statements are true? And again, I'm just going to revert back to math. It automatically is going to make it a checkbox here. So sorry, I hope you're just kind of bearing with me. I know I'm going real fast. I'm just adding some random questions so that we have some data, or so that we can look at some data in a little bit. So if you're just joining us or you're wondering what in the world I'm doing, that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, so I'm going to mark a couple true. We're good. All right, we'll leave it at that for now. Okay, so now let's jump into our more advanced question types. So we're going to build from here. So I'm going to add a new question. All right, and where we left off last time, we looked at all of these options in the top 3 sections here. It's when we get down to this second to last section that we did not really talk about them. So our linear scale, again, I don't know content-wise where this would be used, but it's one of those, let's rate it on a scale of 1 to 5. So I'm not sure how you could use that in a right or wrong kind of quiz type format. You could use it as just a reflection question at the end, just in terms of like, how would you rate your level of understanding, but it wouldn't necessarily be something I would grade. So your linear scale is that, how do you want to rate it, 1 to 5? Okay, but these are the 2 I want to look at. So we have, the first one we have here is our multiple choice grid. Okay, when I select that as an answer choice or as a question type here, this is what I get. So this allows me to have my kids kind of it's almost like matching, I guess. So you could use it in vocabulary. So I would say maybe match each word with its synonym, for example. And then in my rows, I'll have a bunch of different words. In my columns, I'll have synonyms for them. And I just want to make sure that each word has only one answer in the columns. So I'm just going to find synonym practice. I'm having trouble nowadays thinking of different questions. So I'm just going to see if I can find something, maybe synonym practice worksheet to pull questions from. I have no idea what we're going to find here, so let's see. It's a fun game. All right, so, oh, perfect. Okay, so we're going to pull this one right here if it'll let me. Maybe. Okay, so I'm going to put in each of these words. So yell, dim, speedy. So yell, dim, speedy. Beautiful, wet, glad. And start and small. Okay, so my words would go in my rows. And then in my columns, I'm going to put all of the different synonyms here. So happy, fast, begin. Okay, shout, gloomy, little. Whoops, little. And I'm typing these, by the way, and I'm using my arrow key to go down rather than clicking down. So that's why I'm moving so fast through that. Pretty and then damp. Pretty, and then I'm going to hit my down arrow and it will automatically move down to the next option, and then damp. Woo, that was a lot. Okay, so real quick, before I even look at my answer key, this is what it looks like from their view now. All right, so they're asked to match yell. They would find the synonym that goes with yell and they would select it as their answer. Okay, dim, they would find the synonym for dim and select it as their answer. So that's what our multiple choice grid looks like from the student end, okay? And we'll look at our checkbox grid in just a second, but multiple choice grid looks exactly like that. So when I put in my answer key, I'll just go through and I'll select those answers. So yell is shout, dim is gloomy, speedy is fast, beautiful is pretty. It's hard to make them all line up here. Wet, I don't see wet. Is it over? Aha, wet is damp, glad is happy. Of course, we got to go all the way back to the beginning for that one. Start is begin, almost there. Small is little, okay? So I would select all of my answers in there, and then I can decide how much I want each to be worth. So I could make them each worth 1 point, or I could change that for each one. And so they don't all have to be worth the same amount. So that's kind of a cool feature there. And maybe some of these are a little bit harder than others. Like dim, I would say, is a little harder, so maybe I'll give that 2 points. And for wet, I'll just give that 2 points as well. Okay. So that's what we do with our answer key there, and then click done. All right. And then some of our other options with this question type, we do want to say require a response in each row. That way they don't skip any of these answers. If I didn't have a response for each row, then I wouldn't want to select that. But in this case, each row has a matching column, so that works out pretty well there. And then in my 3 dots, I could add a description here. So that is a little place to give more directions. And then I could also limit it to 1 response per column. I probably want to do that. I'll show you why in just a second. And I do have the option to shuffle that row order, so I'll do that. So we can see that, and I'll preview real fast one more time. So I did not select that option to limit their responses to 1 per. So what that means is that when I select small is little, I can also say that start is little and that glad is little. So if you want to make sure that they're not, if each one's only used once, then I want to change that setting. If you don't want to give them that help, then you can leave it as is. Okay, so if you don't want them to be able to select little more than once, we want to turn that setting on. And again, that was found in our 3 dots, and that would be limit to 1 response per column. Okay. So thinking about your content area, I'm wondering what ideas do you have for using this option, the multiple choice grid? Are there things that you can think of where it would work in your particular content area? Maybe. Yeah. So vocabulary is definitely a good one. It could be like synonyms, like I did. It could be antonyms. It could be definitions, as long as they're small. Ooh, awesome! Classifying assets and liabilities in math. Yeah. Okay. So you could have as many or as few columns as you want. So it is kind of like a sorting thing here. So I could also use this to say, like, this is probably not even a standard, but geography, like where would you find each city? Oops, that's not find. Okay. And in that, I could do that in a multiple choice grid as well. Okay. And so for my rows, I might have my cities again. So I don't know, Boston, but also there is, let's go Franklin, because I'm just thinking of random places. I know Massachusetts a little bit. So, and then, you know, I can do something like, I'm from Ithaca, New York. So that's the city I'm going to put there. But I could also do Albany. Whoops. Okay. And then over on the right-hand side of my columns, I don't have to have the same number of columns as rows. So I could just have Massachusetts and New York as my only options. And then they're kind of matching these or categorizing, sorting them into those two. So that would work really well. Like I saw classifying assets and liabilities. That's perfect for that. Yeah, you could do shapes with this. Oh, I see what you mean. Can you add like pictures? I don't think you can add an image to your multiple choice grid. So what you could do is, like if I were talking about classifying quadrilaterals, for example, I could have my categories be like, well, that's not even a good one. Anita, I am not sure about that one because that's a complicated topic. So it doesn't look like you can add images here. The only other thing I can think of here that you could do is you could add in a picture above that has a whole bunch of shapes and number those shapes, maybe put a number in the middle of them. And then when they get to the next question, your rows are just shape 1, shape 2, shape 3. And then these are your shape names. So maybe that's a kind of a workaround there, Anita, but that would be interesting. Yeah. All right, awesome. So that's our multiple choice grid. Okay, let's look at our other one, our checkbox grid, very similar. The only difference is that now I am expecting them to select more than one option. So this is where that option of classifying quadrilaterals comes in. So here's what I would do with this, okay? And then I might put things like square, rectangle, parallelogram, okay, etc. Kite, that's one of my favorites. Ooh, dart, that's a fun one. All of these are quadrilaterals, okay? And then in my columns, I might just say it's a quadrilateral, okay? And I might have the same things. So quadrilateral and then dart, kite, parallelogram, because the cool thing, or maybe not so cool for some of you, about quadrilaterals and classifying them is that every quadrilateral has like 1,000 names because it can fall into multiple categories. So we're going to pretend like this is all inclusive. When I go back to our preview now, woo, okay. When we get to square, I can say, okay, a square is, well, a square is a square. It's also considered a rectangle because it has 4 right angles. It's also considered a parallelogram because it has 2 sets of parallel sides, etc. So it's a quadrilateral. So I would be able to select multiple things per row. A rectangle is a rectangle, always. It's always a parallelogram. It's always a quadrilateral, but it's not always a square, etc. So that would be what that kind of question allows you to do. You can select multiple things within each row. And then again, oops, there it is. Within my answer key, it works the same way. I would say a square is always a square. It's always a rectangle. It's always, and then I could give it a point value there. Okay. So it works very similar to our multiple choice grid up above, but selecting multiple answers. Okay. And then your choices are the same here. You can limit them to one response per column. You can shuffle that row order and you can add a description. That the polygon has all the time. That's a really bad way to phrase that, but we're going to roll with it. All right. Those were our last two question types that we haven't looked at yet. We did talk briefly in our last webinar about date and time. They are not auto-graded, so kind of keep that in mind, but you could use these if you wanted to in content-based things. Time more so than date, I think. Date, I can see that as like a history question, but then you'd have to know like the exact month, day, and year, which I guess is something that you might require from your kids. But the time one, I can see this applicable to math. It could be an elapsed time question. So it could be, you know, we started this webinar at 2 o'clock. It's been 16 minutes. What time is it now? And then they would have to put in 2:16 or something along those lines. It could also be something where you add a picture of a clock, an analog clock, and ask them what time it is. So if that's the skill you're assessing, you could do that. Things like that. So you could do that with time, but just keep in mind that it is not going to auto grade. You are going to have to go in and manually grade it. So I'm going to do just what I had just said. Our webinar started at 2 p.m. today. I'm just going to say it lasted for 1 hour and 15 minutes. What time did it end? All right. And that way we can see what that looks like to grade it. Okay, so I'm going to pause real quick. I'm just going to put in some random answers. It doesn't really matter if they're right or wrong. And then I'm going to actually send this to you to take it to answer these questions so that we can look at some data. So when you take it, you do not need to take it seriously. You can just go ahead and click random answers. In fact, that will help our data more if you click random answers. I just want to make sure we have an answer key for the ones we need. I'm going to get rid of that one. All right. I think we're good to go. Okay. The only other question type that I might want to include, I'm going to include a paragraph one. Okay. So when you complete the paragraph one as I send it to you, oops, just type something random. It can just be a few words. It doesn't matter. All right. So with that said, I'm going to send you this link in our chat right now. I'm going to shorten it so it's a little less lengthy. Okay. Send it to you. And yes, Joanna, I just made a random answer key. It is not the correct answer key, but yes, there is, I believe, an answer key for all of those. Let's double check. Yep, that one's good. And then this one, I just clicked random things. So yes. And then, yeah, we're going to take a look after you take this. We're going to take a look at which ones auto grade and which ones don't, and what to do if they didn't auto grade. So we will investigate that in just a minute. So again, that link is in the chat. If you'll just copy it and paste it into your address bar and just answer randomly. You don't even have to put your real first name and last name. Just anything in there. And you know what? I'll do it too. While we wait, let's jam a little.
I don't mind you coming here.
All right, I'm just gonna pause for about 10 more
Wasting all my
seconds and then we'll
time.
jump back in. If you're not done, don't
'Cause
worry.
when
I
you're
have 4
standing oh
responses
so
already that you can
near,
work with, so
I
it'll be
kinda
okay.
lose my mind. It's not the perfume that you wear. It's not the ribbons in your hair. And I don't mind you coming here.
All right, let's jump back in. So if you're not done, it's okay. We're gonna continue on anyways. So first off, I know, actually I have 5 responses now. I know how many responses I have. I scrolled all the way back up to the top of my form, and you'll notice that I also have a responses tab here. So we haven't looked at that yet. We did all of our work so far in questions, but this is another tab that I can click on to see that responses view. And now I have 7 of you. That's awesome. So when I click on our responses tab, I get a little bit of a different view. So it opens up in this summary view. That's the landing page here. And so I can see as a whole, how did everything go? How did people do on my quiz? Now keep in mind that there were some questions so far that have not yet been graded. So while technically my quiz is out of 33 points, some of those questions I have to manually grade. So it's not going to count those as correct yet. So kind of keep that in mind as you're looking at our insights. So our average response we got, our medium response, and then we get a range of how many points people got there. It also tells us what questions were missed most frequently. So that's helpful if you're looking holistically at your class. And then down below, we can see a snapshot of people's scores. Charlene, you killed it. And right now it tells them that those scores have not been released, so you don't know your score yet. Unfortunately, even if I release these scores, you will never receive them because you don't have access to your email. So you won't see them here. If you want your students to have access to their scores, you want to assign this through Google Classroom, and then they can see their score and they can also see their work once it's been released to them. So kind of keep that in mind. The best way to assign this quiz is through Google Classroom. And then from then on out, it gives you kind of a preview of how people did on each question. So overall, I can see that 5 people chose wandering here and 2 people chose staying in one place. And then I also know that nobody chose running fast. So it just gives you a little graph, and that happens for all of the questions that were multiple choice or multiple select. My short answer questions, I get, here are all the different options that people put in. Okay. Again, this is my paragraph one. I like yellow triangles too. Okay. And then my matching, I can see how many people matched this particular. So right now we're looking at yell, how many people matched yell correctly, and then what the incorrect answers were. And I can toggle between different rows by using these little arrows at the bottom. Same thing goes for my cities. And same thing goes for my checkbox one. Okay. And then my last one, I can see here the different options that people put in. So I know that 4 people answered 315, while 2 people answered 221, etc. Okay, so that's what I get on my overview. Okay, my summary here. I can also look at my data by question, and this allows me to see what each individual answered as we go. So when I select question here, it will give me a drop-down menu, and this drop-down menu includes all of the questions on my quiz. So right now I am just looking at first name, okay? And I can see here are all the different answers to first name. Now, this is great because as I get to, for example, the definition of roaming, here's an actual question. I get to see kind of a snapshot of who answered what. I can look in at those 5 responses here. So I know 5 people answered wandering. I can click on that and see exactly who answered that. So I guess the better way to do it would be to go in and see who answered it wrong. These are the 2 that I need to meet with in small group, virtually, I guess, or that I might need to send some additional materials to study that concept or whatever it is that I'm assessing in that question. I get a snapshot of who has done a great job with it and who hasn't. Okay. Even though this one auto graded because it was multiple choice and I gave it the answer key, I still do have the power to change that manually. So if my answer key was wrong, first off, if my answer key was wrong, you can go back and fix it and it will update it for your students, even if they've already completed the question. So I could always go back to the quiz. Or if I know, like I talked to this kid and, Joanna, we had a conversation and I realized that you misread it or something along those lines, but I want to grant you credit. I can do so. I can go in and say, you know what? I will give you credit. So I can give it to both of you here by changing your score. Okay. I'm going to discard that. Or I can give it just to Joanna and I'll show you how I do that in just a minute. We have to look at it from another view. Okay. So I can look at question by question, and this is probably the way that I would go about grading some of those that don't auto grade. So as a reminder, our multiple choice questions will auto grade. Okay. My short answer questions will auto grade as well. The correct answer was 72. One person put 72, it automatically gave them 5 points. And then the ones that were incorrect were marked with 0 points or were given 0 points. Again, I can go in and manually change it. If they wrote out 72 in words, then I could grant them points there. Or like if they put 072, which is technically equivalent to 72, I could also grant them credit if I wanted to that way. Okay, so you have that power to go in and do that. Notice that also you have the power to give them feedback, but keep in mind that because I did not assign this through Google Classroom, you will never see this feedback. It technically will email it to you, but you will never receive that email. If I do it in Google Classroom, your students are able to pull back up their Google form in Google Classroom to see their responses and what they put, as well as your feedback there. So kind of keep that in mind, but I could add feedback and it looks just like it did when we added feedback to the questions when we were editing the form. So I can add that feedback here with my text, with a link, and with my video. Okay. All right, so this one also auto-graded. Let's find one that didn't. Okay, so this is a multi-select one, right? And so automatically the default is that if you don't select all of the correct answers and only the correct answers, you get 0 credit for it. If you wanted to change that, so like this one, for example, only marked 1 of the correct answers, but there's actually 2, I could go in and give them partial credit right here. Oops. I don't even know if I can give them 0.5. I should have made this worth 2 points, but I did not. Let's see. Yeah, it won't let me give them half a point. So I wish I had made it 2 points, but I could go in and give them a point because they got part of it right. Okay. And notice at the bottom, anytime I change a grade or I add feedback or anything, it is prompting me to manually save it. So you do want to make sure you save it. Most things in Google autosave, this is asking you, do you really want to do it? So the answer is yes, let's save it. And now that person received, oh, I guess that did work for half a point. Never mind, it worked, I didn't see it. That person received half a point for theirs and this person, I guess, received a point. Lucky them. So you can go in and you can manually update those scores as you need. All right, this is our paragraph question. This one does not auto grade at all. Okay, so it'll show me all the different paragraphs that people have typed, and I can go in and say, does this get credit or not? So in this case, it was worth 1 point, so I could give them, I just found out you can give them a fraction of a point if you wanted to, so you could fill in a manual score. Or if you want to give them full credit, you just click on the check mark. Okay, if you want to give them 0, you click on the X. So that's a quick and easy way, and you would just scroll down, read them, decide who gets credit for what. And then again, you want to make sure you hit save. Okay, so super simple. Our synonyms should have auto-graded. Our cities should have auto-graded. Our quadrilateral should have auto-graded as well. And then our last one is the time one, and this one does not auto-grade. So I need to go in and say, okay, the correct answer is 315. All the people who gave me 315 will get full credit. And then that is not the correct answer, so 0 and 0. And then I'll hit save again. Okay. So as I went in and I manually graded those, in my summary, it now updated it, adjusted it. So now my median changed a little and my average changed a little and my range changed as well, based on those updates I did in my question grading. The last way I can view my student responses is by individuals, okay? And so what it does is it will pull their, in their case, it will be S in their lunch account. So kind of keep that in mind, because it's collecting your email addresses, but for teachers, it's collecting first dot last, so that's helpful. But I can switch the question or switch the person nice and easily at the top. If I'm not sure who that person is because I don't know S in their lunch account, I could scroll down, and as a reminder, I highly suggest you use first name, last name as the first couple of questions on your quiz. So you can see, okay, so this person here, first name is here, last name is here. Now I know who's I'm grading. And then I'm looking only at this person's quiz. So my quiz, okay, I can go in and say, all right, so these were just identifying. I know I don't have to give them any points because it's out of 0, but now I can go in and see exactly what this person got right or wrong. And I can change any of their scores here as needed. I can give them individual feedback. So earlier on when I made that comment about how I know that Joanna meant to say this because I talked to her, I could go in and I can give her some individual feedback, and I can change just her grade rather than doing it for both people who got it wrong there. Okay, so I can manually change grades. I can add individual feedback. All right. Are there questions about the way we see responses here? I'm going to show you one more way in just a second, but what questions do you have so far? All right. I don't see any coming in yet. If that changes, they'll keep on typing. I do want to show you a couple more things that we have in our responses view here. Okay, the first thing I can do here is I can turn off my form so it no longer accepts responses. So if you have a hard deadline for something, you can close it by clicking on that, and you'll get this little, it'll turn red. That will change to say not accepting responses, and you'll get this place where you can put a little message. It might say something like the deadline for this is already passed, or you can keep the default, this form is no longer accepting responses. But when my students then go to access this form, so I'm going to take that link back from our chat here and show you what that looks like for them. Oop, let me try that again. I just clicked the wrong button. All right, when they go to open this form now, they'll get this message. The form webinar for sample form is no longer accepting responses. So if you want to turn it off for whatever reason, you have the ability to do that in the responses tab. You'll just click on the button that says accepting responses to turn it off. You can also print responses, which I guess is not super relevant right now, unless you have a printer in your home and you really wanted to, but you can print out individual student responses using that print button. You can also get rid of responses. So a lot of times with my form, I'll go in and I'll take it before I send it to my students so that I can just make sure everything works correctly, my answer keys are correct, and that I just want to make sure my students aren't going to run into any issues. But then before I assign it to them, I want to throw away my response so it doesn't change my summary scores or kind of, well, for the most part, it's going to inflate them. So I don't want to inflate those scores. So I can just go in and delete my single response here by going to individual, finding my sample response, and clicking on the trash can. and then it'll go away. Okay, so some fun things there. And then my favorite button on this page. So I love Google Forms. We've talked about that, but Google Sheets is my second favorite tool. I'm a data nerd, so love Sheets. This little form right, or this little button right here will take this data from this Google form and create a spreadsheet with it. And so when I click on this, it's going to prompt me to either create a brand new spreadsheet, or if I want to put all of my form responses in one place, I could select an existing one, and each time I would select that same one, so that all it'll do is create a new tab at the bottom, and then I have them all in one place. So in this case, I'm going to create a new one, and I'm just going to hit the create button and give it a second. So now it is opening my responses in another Google tool that we're going to talk about later this week, sometime on my schedule here. I'm opening my schedule on Thursday afternoon. Okay, and I see all of my questions are different columns, and then each response is a different row. But the cool thing about putting this in Google Sheets is that I can easily sort it and manipulate the data. Okay, so when I put in homeroom teacher as a question here, this is important. If I only wanted to see my class at a single time, I could filter the data so I'm only looking at Cheatham. Or I could sort the data so that all of the answers for Cheatham go to the top, and then I think the other choice was Hunt. All of the Hunt answers go to the bottom. Okay. I also, remember how I talked about why I like to do first name and last name? If I have last name as a single question, a standalone question, I can sort my data so it's alphabetical by last name. Okay. And I'm not going to show you all this now because I'm leaving a little teaser so we can learn about it on Thursday afternoon. But the other thing I love to do is I love to color code my spreadsheet based on the answers they give, or even sometimes just based on the score. So this is a great way, especially right now since we're pass fail. You could make this cell right here turn a certain color based on whether it would be a passing grade or a failing grade. And that way, when you go to enter your scores in your grade book as pass fail, it's real simple. If it's red, it's a fail. If it's green, it's a pass. And then as you're entering those scores, it's all a visual thing. It's nice and quick and easy. Okay, so like I said, we're going to save all of that for Thursday afternoon, but I wanted you to realize that you have that capability in your Google form by going to your responses tab and then clicking on that Google Sheets icon there. And then we will talk about all the sorting and formatting things you can do on Thursday. Okay. And then the last thing we can do, we have 3 dots. So that always means we have an extra menu here. All right. The first option says get email notifications for new responses. I don't believe that's going to work for you because keep in mind that you are currently logged into your teachers.fwsd.org email address, and that email account is not accessible. Now, we're supposed to have all those emails routed to our FWSD email address, but it doesn't seem to work for most people. So I don't think you'll be able to turn this on. And in fact, that's a relatively new feature. I don't remember seeing that, so that's exciting. You can change your response destination. So when I created this sheet, I chose to create a new Google form or Google sheet here. And so right now, this is my response destination. But if I want to route my answers to a different location, I can do so with my 3 dots and click on select response destination. Okay. I could unlink my form so that my answers will no longer be populated into that spreadsheet. I could download that spreadsheet. I can print all responses, and I can delete all responses. So all of those options happen in our 3 dots here. Anytime you see 3 dots, you know it's fun. All right. I'm going to pause again. What questions do you have right now about viewing student responses, grading student responses, things like that?
Kelly, hi.
Hi.
I created a quiz yesterday and I sent it, and I actually saw that one of the students supposedly, well, he turned in the assignment, but there is no grade in there. Does that mean that he did not take or completed the quiz?
So where are you looking for that grade? Are you looking in Google Classroom or are you looking
Yes,
at the quiz itself?
I am looking at Google Classroom. I was trying to look at the quiz, but I didn't actually know how.
Yeah, I'll show you. That's a great question, and that's an important one to talk about. So give me 1 second to open up. Ooh, I think this one probably has a quiz. Let's see. Yes, okay. So here's a quiz in a Google Classroom, okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at my quiz by viewing the assignment through Google Classroom. And when I created this, and I don't know if it'll let me show you right now. Yeah, so when I created this quiz, underneath where I attached my quiz, I turned on this feature to do grade importing. So you want to, first thing you want to do is make sure that feature is turned on for your quiz. You can do that even after the fact, as long as you go in. Let me show you that again. 1 second. Okay. As long as you go into your quiz, and you can either view it and edit it that way, or you can do the 3 dots and edit to get back to this window, and then just double check and make sure this is clicked. If it's not, then click on it. So
Yeah,
that's
it
step
is.
one.
Okay. But I'm noticing that my quiz, when I did it last night, I created it as it is a quiz assignment, something like that, when you create the assignment. And after I finish the quiz, it I need to add it?
So
Does it
you should be able to open it to the point where I'm open to, right? Are you able to click on the quiz and get to the student work view?
I'm gonna check right away.
Yeah. Well, once you're here, and this is the important part, I get this question a lot. You'll get here, and I've already done it for this student, so let me take it away. Okay. You'll get here and you'll say, none of my students have grades, but I told it to import. Well, that's because you actually have to do one more step to import those grades. As long as that feature is turned on, you should see a button on the top right-hand corner that says import grades. You do have to manually go in and click on this button and click import. And once you do that, it will bring that score in on this left-hand side. So it just added that 5 out of 7 here for this one student because I clicked on import grades. Now, the reason why it makes you prompt it to import those grades is because it knows that a lot of questions are things that you have to manually grade. So it wants to give you that opportunity to do that before it pulls those grades into Google Classroom.
Yeah, it does. I did. And it has the grade now, but it says draft under
Yes.
the grade. Is that
Yes,
okay?
so the last thing you need to do in order for your students to see that grade is you need to select the names of your students. So either all of your students by clicking the plus or the check mark at the top here, or you could go in one by one, and then you want to click that return button to send it back to them.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the return button was to like make them redo everything again.
No, so you're returning work whether they need to redo it or not. So if you want them to redo something, you want to specifically say in their private comments, please revise and resubmit or something along those lines. But whether they need to revise it or not, you want to return all of their work. Otherwise, they won't be able to see their grades. So that's important. It's a good question though. All right, let's go ahead and look at our last thing today. Okay, so we talked about viewing responses. Let's look at that branching and response validation piece. Now, 2 different kind of reasons to use those 2 features. So let's talk about what they are first. Branching allows us to take our students to different questions based on how they answer one question. So if I wanted to use my Google form as a teaching experience, okay, meaning it's not just for necessarily for assessing my students, but it's also maybe used for reteaching as they go. So if they come in here and the question is, what is the definition of roaming? And they answer it correctly, one option is to send them to a harder question at that point or a different question. Maybe they've mastered that concept. I bring them to a different concept from there. The other option, if they get it wrong, is to go maybe to some review materials or to go to an easier question. So it allows me to take my form and send it in multiple directions based on how they answer questions. Okay, so let's look at what that looks like for this. In order to do branching, you have to use sections in your form. So we talked about adding sections in our first webinar, so our part 1. In this case, we also need to have sections. So at the bottom of my webinar, or at the bottom of my form, I'm going to go ahead and insert a new section. Oops, section. That's that last option. Okay, and in this case, this one might be, so what was that? That was synonym reteach. So this will be the section that they go to if they get that question wrong. And then in this section now, I could add things like images, or if I have like an anchor chart, that would be a great thing to add there, or a video. I don't know what's out there about synonyms. Ooh, that's a lot. All right, we're just going to pretend like this makes sense. We're going to choose that one. I could add a reteaching video. It could be something I've recorded as well. Okay. It could be a link to an outside site. I could insert some text here. Okay. And I could include a hyperlink to an outside site here. It could just be easier questions at this point. But this section, they will only see this section in these resources if they get the question wrong. So that's the goal behind it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create one more section for if they get it right. You don't have to have section titles. I'm just doing it for the clarity right now. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and just add we're going to pretend like this is a synonym extension question. I don't have the creativity right now to create one, but I might add more difficult questions about extensions or about synonyms there. So now I have 2 different places that they can go. We're going to go back up to that question. Oh, it's not even a synonym question. Pretend it is. Okay, so I'm going to select my multiple choice question. And that feature lies in those 3 dots. And our branching feature is go to section based on answer. Okay, and when I choose that, it will add these options next to each answer. So wandering is my correct answer. I want to continue to the continuing on section. Okay. Staying in one place, that's the wrong answer. They need the reteaching. So I'm going to send them to this section. Running fast, ooh, again, not the right answer. That's our reteaching section where they need to go for that. So now when my students are taking the quiz, it's going to make me answer these, so bear with me. Okay, when they get to this question and they answer wandering, oh, I'm going to have to do all the questions. Please, I should have made them not required. Oh, it's going to make me answer all the things I'm regretting having chosen this option. There we go. Remind me to turn all of the required off if we're going to do this again to preview. Okay, there we go. And we're just going to put in. All right, so now when I click next, keep in mind that on that question, I answered the correct answer. When I click on next now, it's going to bring me to that extension question. But when I go back and select the wrong answer, now when I click next, it's going to bring me to that reteaching section. So depending on how I answer the question, it will bring me to a new place within my Google form. So this is great for differentiating within. It's great for reteaching within your form. It's great for extending, all of those different options. And that's done with branching. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, mostly because it's already 2:49. But if that's something you're interested in learning more about, let me know and I'll send you some resources. So send me an email, and there are lots of resources out there about how to use branching within Google Forms. This is also used a lot of times to make those choose your own adventure kind of stories and things like that. You can do that right within a form because it will send you to a new section based on what you answered. So that's a really cool use of that branching feature. Branching only works in certain question types, so you can only use it in multiple choice. I'm trying to remember. I think it's multiple choice and drop down. Okay, so multiple choice and drop down. And I don't even have a drop down question to try it with. But those question types that have a single static answer, those are the ones that work best for our branching questions. Joanna asked a great question. Can you create a bonus question for extra points? Yes. So what you would do is when you set that point value for that question, you want to make it 0. So it's out of 0 points. But then when we look at that student question, which question did I just do that with? Okay, so it was this one. Notice that it's out of 0 points, but I can still add points here. So if they got it right, I can give them 5 points and that will be counted as a bonus. Okay. All right, and then the last part that we're going to look at right now is that response validation piece. If you've ever done a digital breakout in a Google form, that's exactly how they do it. We're also using response validation. If you've attended one of our EdTech webinars, at the very end, you have to go in and complete a Google form and give it's like a secret code, a secret word that you get that day. And if you don't put that word in correctly, it won't let you submit your form. So to do that, it works on certain question types again. So you have to be in, oh, that's cool. Huh, I didn't realize that. Sorry, losing my train of thought here, but in that time question, in your 3 dots, you have the option of answering with a duration. So that's actually super helpful for my math teachers if you're talking about elapsed time. So that's a fun one. All right, fun little discovery. Anyways, back on track, response validation. I'm going to insert a new short answer question. Okay. And if I want to make it so that you can only move on in my quiz if you give me this bonus word that I have given you, okay, the secret word, you have to put it in correctly. I'm going to go ahead and turn on response validation. And I do that again in those 3 dots. And you'll notice that that's an option there. And so this makes it so that I can require a specific answer or a specific format for an answer. So in this case, I want a particular like word itself. So I'm going to change where it says number because I don't want a number. Okay. I want text. Okay. And then my text here, my options here, I can say that I want it to contain, to not contain, or I can have it format as an email address or a web address. In this case, I want it to contain. And then maybe our bonus word is bonus. Okay. And now if they don't answer this exactly as is, they won't be able to submit it. They won't be able to move on. I can even then give them some error text. I can say something like, oops, that's not the right word. Try again. Okay. And that's what they'll see when they try to answer this question. Now, I hesitate to do it in this form because it's so lengthy. So let me make a brand new one so we can try it with just one question. Okay, so when I do that again, bonus question, and I do that short answer, and I turn on my response validation, and I say that it's text that contains the word bonus. Okay, and now when I go to preview, this is what it'll look like for them. So they get this bonus question, and if they put in the wrong answer and they try to submit, they get that, oops, try again. Nope, still try again. But now it works. Okay, so it's got a lot of uses. It's like I said, it's used if you're trying to create some sort of breakout where there are secret codes that they have to solve. It's also used to lock your form so that nobody else can take it unless they have that code. So that's kind of helpful. You could create that as your first question in the first section. And then if they don't answer it correctly, they can't move on to section 2 where all of your content questions are. So lots of different ways to use that. But there are different question types that are involved with response validation, as well as some different options for response validation. So for example, if I were doing a math problem, okay, and I wanted to know, what is 14 plus 28, okay, And I want to make sure that they answer with an actual like numerical answer. I can make sure that their text, that's not the one I want, that their number is between, and I can give them a range of like 0 to 100. And that way, if they don't answer something between 0 and 100, they won't be able to submit it. I could even say, make sure you write your answer in digit, like using the numerical form. But if I try to type in 13, it's not going to let me. But if I try to do 50, it will, because that's between 0 and 100. So kind of some different ways to make sure they format that answer correctly. So we're not going to have a chance to really explore all of these things, but just know that there are a bunch of different options to look at. You can give them length, so character count requirements here. Again, those number, you have a whole bunch of different options there. Okay, and then regular expression is super complicated. I don't even fully understand it, so we're not going to get into that. But if you wanted to know more, Google search will tell you a lot of information. So that's response validation. That was the last thing we're going to address today. Right now, what questions do you have while I find our webinar attendance link? Oh, and Joanna, I didn't answer that. Even with your bonus question, yes, you will have to manually go in and grade them, because otherwise it will grant them 0 points automatically. So you'd have to go in and add that in. Okay, here is our webinar attendance link. Cynthia, I don't know that I understand exactly what you're saying there.
Okay, if I were to do on my, when they come into the website and they look at my attendance, they hit that because they answer those questions. If I wanted to make a bonus question for extra points, if I put up there like a joke and then they had to write it out what their answer was, can I do that?
Yes, within the form, I would just make it a short answer.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if you're using it for bonus, like Joanna asked, then you just want to make sure it's worth 0 points. You will have to go in and manually grade their bonus question.
But I could attach that to the already existing one, could I?
Yes, absolutely. So
Okay.
you can edit any form that you have out there, and it will edit that live. As long as the student doesn't have it open at the time, they'll see those changes the next time they do open it. If the student has it open at the time, they will have to close out and restart.
But that won't affect the rest of the questions, will it? If they don't answer it right, or if they don't answer at all?
As long as you give it 0 points, then it should be fine. If you give it a point value, then it would change the total number of points for the quiz. So that would be when it would change things. But if it's worth 0 points, you should be good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, any other questions for me? If not, then you are free to go about the rest of your day. Hopefully I'll see you at some point tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to do a repeat of Intro to Seesaw, and then we have Navigating Padlet in the afternoon.